Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make pan-seared pork chops with mashed potatoes, a cheesy roasted garlicky broccoli, and a sourdough loaf, as well as some sauteed mushrooms and onions. So I just pulled my sourdough loaf out of the fridge. It's been bulk proofing overnight. And so I'm going to flip it out on some parchment paper. Peel off gently, and then I'm going to give it a nice score along the middle, a nice deep score so that it will have that really big burst, and then I'm just going to give it some little scores down the side, and then I'm going to transfer it to my Dutch oven, which is very hot. I just had it in the oven for the last hour at 500 degrees. So I'm going to use my parchment paper to transfer this, so nice and safe. And then we're going to put our lid on and we're going to pop this in the oven, and we are going to bake it for 20 minutes at 500 degrees. Then we will take the lid off and bake it for another 20 minutes at 450 degrees. So my oven is nice and toasty at 500 degrees. We're going to bake it for 1 hour, for 20 minutes at 500 degrees. So let me set my timer for 20 minutes. Then we'll remove the lid and bake it another 20. Okay, let's start peeling our potatoes for the mashed potatoes. So I've got some water in here starting to warm up, and I'm going to just peel up my russet potatoes. I find russet potatoes make the nicest, fluffiest mashed potatoes. I'm going to give them a quick peel, making sure to get off all of the skins, because I don't like any chunky skins at all in my potatoes. So we'll peel this off and get all of them off. Russet potatoes, Idaho potatoes, make the best mashed potatoes because they have a higher starch content, so they're nice and fluffy. And it's my other oven warming up to 350. And compared to like a gold potato, is more waxy, so it will have a very different texture to it than Idaho potatoes. So if you like fluffier potatoes instead of I want to say like stickier potatoes, use russets. If you like sticky potatoes, then use a gold potato, like a Yukon Gold. Okay, 3 more potatoes. I gave these a quick rinse before because potatoes are always very dusty and a bit dirty. So I rinsed them off, and we'll chop them up. I'm going to chop them up into fairly small pieces because I do want them to cook up fairly quickly, so our dinner can be ready in about around 40 minutes. That's as long as what my bread needs to take. And so I'm trying to plan everything to get done right around that time frame so we can have nice hot bread in our dinner. There we go. Peel this up. And 1 more potato. And we are having, tonight's dinner, we're going to have 8 people. It will be us, 4 of our kids, and my parents will be joining us for Sunday dinner tonight. My oldest daughter is off in Ohio visiting friends for the long weekend. So, there we go. Now, we're going to do a quick thing, but let me zoom in on our potatoes.
You got a comment that someone prefers red potatoes for their mashed potatoes.
Yes.
Have you used those before?
I have. If red potatoes are kind of hard to peel, so I sometimes will do red potatoes and I'll mash them with the skins on. And they have a waxier, they're not as waxy as a Yukon Gold, but they're a little bit more waxy than a russet. But they do make a good like mashed potato, especially like a garlic mashed potatoes. Those work really well in. And the red skins, if you keep them on, add a nice little like visual. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of cut my big ones in thirds, and then I'm gonna have them in chopping. I'm trying to get them all to be about the same size, not too big, because I do want them to cook up evenly and quickly. There we go. So I'm cutting them to be about like this big. You want them to be kind of uniform because your smaller potatoes will disintegrate away before you get to your bigger potatoes are nice and tender. And there we go. And we're gonna give these a nice chop. Mashed potatoes are kind
You
of
just got a
everyone's
question?
favorite.
Are those russet potatoes?
These are, yes, they're good old russet potatoes. I love these because I can buy a big, huge bulk bag from Costco. And we eat a lot of potatoes in a week. If you can imagine, we feed every day between 7 to 9 people. So we go through a lot of food, and these you can, Costco has really nice big potatoes. I hate when I get like a bag of russet potatoes and they're really small. Those are just a pain to work with. These are nice ones because you can bake them, or they're easier to peel. When you have a bigger potato, it's just much easier to peel than a little one. We got 2 more left to chop up and throw in, and then we can work on the next part of our dinner, which will be seasoning our pork chops. And normally our pork chops, I got them from Costco too. They're a little thinner than I normally like. I really like sometimes when you can get those really thick pork chops because they cook up so nicely. These will work well. They just need a little less cooking time. There we go, and last one in. If you didn't know, the white stuff at the top of your water is actually potato starch coming up out. If you want even fluffier potatoes, rinse them after you cut them and then put up fresh water in it. That will give you an even fluffier mashed potato. Okay, so we've got our potatoes chopped up. I'm going to get my baking tray, and we're going to take out our pork chops and we're going to season them before we do our cooking. Okay. So these are pork rib and loin chops, so they do have a bone in them, which, you know, they're nice. I think they're a little bit better than the straight up loin chops. I like the rib part of the pork chop. It's a tender, more flavorful cut of meat. Okay, let's get these all out here. And kind of spread them out. Have to do a little feng shui to get them all on here. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we will do 9 pork chops today. We'll save the rest for later. Okay, let me get my hands a quick rinse since I touch all the meat and I want to be using my spices. Okay. So first...
No washing the meat. It'll be cooked at a high temperature.
Yes. Washing the meat, I think the argument can go both ways, but as long as you're cooking your meat at a high temperature and all the way through, you're going to kill off any bacteria, and sometimes washing your meat can lead to further contamination because that bacteria could spread to your sink, and if you don't sterilize your sink after washing it, then you can get cross-contamination. So my goal is just to make sure they're cooked at a high temperature. So we covered it with some Worcestershire sauce. And now we are going to give it a nice sprinkling of garlic salt. And the Worcestershire, I can never say it. It works with the natural fats in the meat and it helps tenderize it. The acidity with the fat in the meat helps it become really juicy. So whenever you're cooking with meat, always add some sort of acidity to it to help really tenderize it. And then we're gonna add some Mrs. Dash's table blend. And then what I'm going to do is I'm now going to flip over each one with one hand so that I can keep my other hand free. And we're gonna do the exact same thing on the other side. You always wanna make sure you season both sides of your meat so that they get good flavor all throughout.
You got a question? What's the Worcestershire sauce? They don't know what it is.
Okay, it is like it's like a vinegar. It's a type of vinegar that also has like anchovies in it and some other spices, but it is a fermented, like it has vinegar in it. Let's see if I can even look at it on here. Vinegar, molasses, sugar, anchovies, onions, garlic. So it's essentially a seasoned vinegar, but the acidity helps to really tenderize the meat and it adds a really great flavor to it. It does not have a fishy flavor to it. But I do remember having anchovies in it because it was created in like the 1800s by some lord in the Worcestershire in England, and he used it with his food, and that's how it became famous. Again, another useless fact. Okay, giving it a nice sprinkling of Mrs. Dash's table blend, which is a finely blended seasoning, which I love to use on my meat. It's salt-free, so we're gonna add a little bit of garlic salt. And then these will be ready to sear off in just a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna move my tray over to my pan over here, which will be searing, and then I'm gonna wash my finger. Okay, now we're going to be chopping up, we're gonna prep our onions and mushrooms. So we're gonna have our pork chops. I'm gonna sear them off pan fried, then we'll finish them in the oven, and then we'll top them with kind of a smothered mushroom and onion sauce, which is just, I absolutely love. Mushrooms and onions are just so good. So I'm gonna cut off the ends of my onions, and then I'm gonna do a nice kind of thin cut, and I just remove this whole top layer of onion. And it should peel right off. And then I'm going to cut it in half, and I'm going to kind of do not a super thin, but you know, kind of a smaller slice, a long slice down, because I do want them to kind of be like a stringy onion, and they'll get a little bit smaller as we saute. So they'll saute up, and there'll be a nice little stringy onion for our smothered mushroom sauce. Through here, and nice. I'm gonna put a little bit of olive oil in my pan over here. I'm using a non-stick pan just because it is just easier for cleanup. And I'm gonna add about, that's a tablespoon, maybe a tablespoon and a half of oil. And we're gonna let it heat up. And when it gets warm, we're gonna add in some garlic and then our onions, and we're gonna saute till they get nice and caramelized. Let me grab some tongs over here.
And you got a question, what are you making tonight?
We are making, we're gonna do pan-seared pork chops with a smothered mushroom onion sauce, mashed potatoes, and then a kind of a cheesy roasted garlic broccoli, but we're going to be using gruyere and Swiss cheese on it, which are together they make a really nice combination. Get my tongs. My garlic oil's heating up. I'm going to add in my garlic. We can see all the potato starch is coming up to the top of our boiled water. So I'm adding in about a big heaping teaspoon of garlic into the oil. We'll let that heat up. And then I'm going to take a paper towel and I'm going to blot the starch off. This will lead to a bit more fluffy of a potato. Just be careful when you do this because this water is hot, but taking that starch away will allow for a fluffier potato. And sometimes you can do this also in the beginning by rinsing, but I find that this works just fine. See how it's picking up the potato starch? It will also prevent your pot from like boiling over too much because the starch at the top will trap in the heat. There we go. Perfect. And that's just taking away that excess starch so that we have a nice fluffy potato. Get my heating up over here nicely. It's starting to sizzle. And now I'm going to add in my onions. And then I'm just gonna break them up with my tongs so that I can saute them. And I'm just making sure I get them coated in the olive oil because I do want them to all caramelize up nicely for this sauce. There we go. And now let's prep our marshmallows, our mushrooms. You know, for the longest time, my kids called mushrooms marshmallows. So we've got some baby bellas. I'm gonna go give them a quick rinse because you can see these ones are a bit dirty. Pre-sliced mushrooms have already been washed and whatnot, but I'm gonna give these a quick rinse. And then I'm going to turn my potato water down just a bit. And there's this old wives' tale where if you put a wooden spoon over it, allegedly it won't boil over. Now, whether that's true or not, but it does seem to help a little bit. Okay, we're going to slice up our baby bella mushrooms. You could use white button mushrooms for this if you wanted, or if you want to be super bougie, you could use some chanterelles. I love chanterelles, but they're hard to come by at the grocery store. I know Costco typically carries them from like October, November till like January, but that's the only time they carry them. And I'm sure Whole Foods probably has them, but I don't shop at Whole Foods all that often. I would love to go there more. It's just not really convenient for where we live. There's not one near us. It would be like a 20 to 30 minute drive. Okay, I'll get these all sliced up nicely. And I'm doing them, you know, a good size, kind of a slice, not super thin or thick. But that way they'll crisp up nicely on both sides and they'll let out their nice mushroomy flavor. There we go. And we'll get this guy. So we've got our mushrooms all prepped. I'm going to give our onions a little toss. They're going to cook a little bit slower because I'm using them. I'll show you. This is my back burner, so it's much smaller. But when you're trying to cook lots of things, you got to make do. I'm going to break these up. Perfect. And then, while we're going over here, we're going to get work on making our garlicky butter for our broccoli. So, I'm going to turn on my back.
Got a comment from someone that they cut the stems off and just wondered why you do not.
Because they have, the stems have the nice flavor. Now, unless you're using the giant portobello mushrooms, those stems are a little bit chewier. But I find on baby bellas, if you look at them, they're really no different from the tops of the mushrooms. So they don't have a different texture or flavor. With giant portobello mushroom cups, yes, they are slightly different. Okay, so I'm going to put in about a half a stick of butter, and I've got my back burner on, and we're going to melt this, and then we're going to add in some minced garlic. You could use fresh garlic if you wanted. With fresh garlic, you don't need to use quite as much with the minced garlic because this isn't as potent as fresh garlic. So we're going to use about a teaspoon to teaspoon and a half, which would be about 2 cloves of garlic, of fresh garlic, if you want to do that. Fresh garlic is great, and I think it tastes delicious. It's just such a pain to peel it and smash it and dice it. So I always try to, if I'm in certain dishes, I will use fresh garlic on, but it's just such a pain. Okay. Give these a nice thaw. You can see they're starting to become translucent and get a little golden. And then I'm gonna swirl our butter around. Now we're gonna put in, since we have at least a good portion of it melted, we're gonna put in our garlic. So kind of, I just use the edge of my knife and I'm gonna put it in there.
You got a nice question about your apron. Is it French?
It's actually from Williams and Sonoma. I got it handed to me from my mom. It's, I think it actually is French on it. It does actually have, it looks like some French on it, but it's just the Williams and Sonoma, whatever. I get a lot of Pammy's from my mom. She like goes out and buys stuff and then she decides like 3 months later it isn't her. I've inherited a lot of like Le Creuset pots from her because she's like, you know what? Orange and red aren't my thing. I'm really into blue, so I need blue now. And I'm like, give them to me. I will take your expensive pots. I will take them. You know, so she's a little funny like that, but you gotta love her nonetheless. Let me get a little spoon over here to stir our, there we go. And we're just gonna cook it until our garlic gets a little like crispy, a little brown, because we really want that garlic flavor to come out into our butter, so it's a nice flavor that will coat our broccoli with.
You got another question about what you're cooking if you want to run it back real quick?
Yes, I'll tell you as we walk to the oven, we're about to take the lid off of our sourdough. So we are making a pan-seared pork chops with a smothered mushroom sauce, garlicky, cheesy broccoli, roasted broccoli. So we've got our nice poof, first part. Now we're gonna bake it for another 20 minutes to get the nice golden color. But we gotta first move the temperature down to 450 degrees. So oven, bake, 450, and then timer for 20 minutes, which sometimes people cook it along a little bit longer if they like the really dark crust. But I like to keep mine a little bit more a golden brown because I like to use it for grilled cheeses. Okay. Let's check how these are going. Good, we're starting to get a nice brown caramelization on here.
You got a question, what's in the oven?
That is our sourdough bread. We made it, I think, 2 days ago, and we just took it out of our fridge from its kind of bulk fermentation and bulk proofing, and then we baked it up. We baked it at 500 degrees for 20 minutes, and now we'll bake it another 20 minutes with the lid off at 450. That will be our yummy bread for tonight's dinner. Okay, looks like these are crisping up nicely. Let's check on our, I'm gonna check my potatoes. My little way to see if they're done and ready for mashed potatoes is I'm just gonna pull out a fork and I'm gonna put up a piece of mashed potato, and then if it does not smush easily, like this is not smushing easily, they still need to cook more. And you wanna find your biggest piece of potato, because if you don't, you do it with a small one, your bigger ones might be underdone, and then you're gonna have lumpy mashed potatoes. Okay.
You got a question. Is this the Hell's Kitchen type cooking show, lady? Much nicer. I'd say more like Julia Childs, maybe?
No, I don't know. I've always said maybe if I had my kids or my husband in here, I might be more like Gordon Ramsay over Julia Childs.
We might have to try that later this year.
I know.
Have me and Torrin cook and you yell at us.
Yes. I will say that it is sometimes what I think is like common sense, and it like behooves. I'm like, why are you doing it that way? I would have never have thought, but I guess our brains work differently. Okay, I'm putting our mushrooms in here, and they're gonna saute up with the onions. Now we've got a lovely browned butter and garlic. Nice. You don't want to make sure when you're browning your butter you don't burn it. I'm going to turn off my black thing. So you just got to watch it, but we've got a nice frothiness, and if you see it, you can see kind of a golden hue to our butter. It's still really frothy. Okay, I'm gonna put that right there. Now let's prep our broccoli for our cheesy broccoli. If you've never used brown butter in cooking, the butter gives a more caramely, roasted nut flavor to it when you caramelize it because you're essentially browning the milk solids in it. But it adds just a lovely flavor that is different from just using regular butter, especially in cookies. Let me get a baking dish. Okay. I know my Le Creuset lid is still very hot over here. Okay, we're gonna be roasting our broccoli in the oven. For easy cleanup, just put parchment paper down, especially with cheese. Otherwise, you're gonna be scrubbing your baking dish forever. So parchment paper is your friend, not your enemy. And I use it for like everything.
I missed your question if you want to ask it again.
Okay, let's give this a good stir. And let me slide this out of the way so I can put my tray up there. And then I'm gonna chop up my broccoli a little bit smaller. Sometimes when I get my broccoli in the bag, I get really huge floret pieces, and I don't want them to be super large. Okay, so we've got our pre-washed and prepped broccoli here. And there's my knife over here. I'm just gonna take some of these really big ones and cut them in half.
Oh, okay. I guess someone asked what type of meat you were making.
We have, these are pork chops. So they are bone-in pork chops. So they have the loin and the rib part of the pork chop, which I love the rib part of the pork chop, which you only get with bone in. It's just a nicer cut of meat. It's like the T-bone of pork chops. Okay, so we're just gonna cut some of these larger pieces of broccoli in here. We'll put them on our parchment paper, and then we're gonna pour our brown garlic butter over it and kind of give them a nice toss, and then we'll sprinkle it with a little bit of garlic salt and a gruyere and Swiss cheese mix. If you've never had gruyere is the typical cheese that they use in fondue. Has a nice melting point. Okay, let me give our onions and mushrooms a nice stir.
You got asked if you put salt in the potato water.
I do not put salt in the potato water because when I mash them up later, I will be adding in salt. And potatoes are like sponges. They can absorb a lot more salt than you think, so I typically add them towards the very end. Here is our brown butter and roasted garlic. There we go. And then I'm gonna sprinkle with garlic salt. And I'm gonna do a quick little toss. I'm gonna use my tongs just so my hands don't get greasy, but you feel free to go in with your hands as well. A lot of times I kind of go all the way in with my hands. You want to just kind of make sure you kind of get that butter all over, because that's going to really kind of stick the flavors on. And then what I do is I just kind of bunch them a little bit closer together, but not where they're totally on top of each other, just a little closer, just so that when I'm sprinkling my cheese on, it's not going to have, it'll cover more broccoli than pan.
I just got a nice comment from Ann. She says whenever she's scrolling and she sees you, she watches until you finish whatever you're doing.
Oh, thank you. So this is my mix of Swiss and gruyere. And gruyere, if you're not familiar with it, it's like the most common cheese used in like fondue, which, oh, I love fondue. It is delicious. You know what? I just love cheese. Okay. And then we will pop these in the oven in just a second. But I'm gonna first start on our pork chop so we can get everything done at around the same time. Okay, let me turn my burner off, and we're gonna add in some olive oil. You wanna have a good amount to kind of cover the bottom of your pan, but you don't need to have it drenched. But just so that we're getting a good sear off. We will pan sear them, and then I'll finish them off in the oven. That way they don't overcook. So I'm gonna wait until my oil heats up. What I like to do with pork chops or lamb chops, or if I'm searing a steak, is I do a quick sear on both sides of the meat just to get that nice golden brown crust, and then I finish them off in the oven. Because if you try to cook your pork chop or steak or lamb chop through on the stove until you've got your, medium rare, medium, whatever you want it at, it will get overdone. It will become dry, all the juices will come out. That's why I like to finish it off. So I have this oven preheated to 350 degrees.
You got asked, what'd you end up doing with the brown butter? I believe it's on the broccoli.
I tossed it on so it was garlic and brown butter, and I tossed it on our broccoli, and then I added some garlic salt, and then this is Swiss and Gruyere cheese, and we'll roast that in the oven. But let me check on my potatoes and see if we are ready to get these mashed up soon.
Yeah, a lot of comments that people like your show, and like that's why we do it, so you can hopefully help teach some people, and I'll learn just by exposure as well.
So here I found a big potato, and if my fork goes through perfect like that, that means they are ready to mash. So you just find your biggest potato in there. That's why you really want to cut them the same size. I'm gonna drain these, and then I'm gonna put some butter in them and let them sit for a minute before I whip them. Let me get a lid. I just do the quick, easy drain where I put the lid over it, and I use oven mitts when you do it because sometimes the steam will come up, and you just leave a little slit like that, and then you just dump it out. And then I'm gonna put this back here because I don't want to put it on my burner that's still hot, because if you do, you'll crisp up your potatoes at the bottom. So we had, I'm gonna use a stick and a half of butter because this is mashed potatoes, and mashed potatoes need good butter in it. I always say if you're eating mashed potatoes, you're not eating them because you're on a diet. And I don't like mashed potatoes made with milk. I'm like the thing. You gotta have butter and cream for your mashed potatoes. Okay, now that we're done with this burner, I'm gonna take that one off, and I'm gonna move this guy over here since he's cooking a little bit bigger. I'm gonna give him a nice, I'm gonna saute these up until my mushrooms and my onions got a nice golden brown color. I can hear my oil sizzling over here. So I'm going to pop my pork chops in. Okay. You want to always wait until your oil is hot so you can get a good sear.
Someone watched your Super Bowl show, and they made, I think, the McCormick's, that's the Lowry's wings. It's like, oh yeah, try the other ones. Those are the best.
My son loves the Lowry's ones. They're super simple and easy, but the La Brea Tarpits ones are better.
Oh, you have a question? What's the difference between sauteing and frying?
So sauteing is you're bringing out the browning color of it, versus frying is like cooking it in oil, like to where you're crisping it up. So it's more of like a browning part of the saute. So high heat.
And what are the pork chops seasoned with?
The pork chops are seasoned with Worcestershire sauce, Mrs. Dash's table blend, and garlic salt. I'm gonna check these out. Nice. So you're just doing a quick sear on each side because you want a nice browning crust on it. And then we'll finish them off in the oven. And a little bit more.
You got a question? How many people are you cooking for?
8 people tonight. I'm going to pop in our broccoli, and I'm going to be putting them in my oven right here to roast. And those need about 5 to 10 minutes, give or take. You want to wait until the broccoli has a vibrant color, and the cheese is melted, and sometimes a little bubbly with some browning on it. I'm gonna rotate my pan. There we go, that one's nice. Then I'm going to get this ready for my mashed potatoes. I'm gonna get a trivet to put under it because it's kind of, there we go. And so I have my butter in there. I put it in so it would start to melt. I don't like to blend it until it's starting to melt. And then I'm gonna add a bit of cream in. And I'm just going to beat them in my pot with my hand mixer. Sometimes I do it in a KitchenAid. If I have a really big, like at Thanksgiving when I'm feeding like 30 plus people, I'll do it in my KitchenAid. Okay, I'm gonna transfer these back to this baking dish. Don't worry about it going back on the raw meat because again, this is going into the oven to finish cooking.
And Thanksgiving is more like 50.
Yeah, it's
just
more
your
like 50.
siblings and their spouses is 24.
Yes, you're right. It is like 50 at Thanksgiving. It used to be 30, and it's just everybody has so many kids. Like I have 5 kids, and my sister has 5 kids, and then like 2 of my brothers each have 3 kids, and then there's just so many. I have so many nieces and nephews, but I am one of 10. I'm the youngest of 10. Big, crazy family. So we're gonna sear these off. Let me give this a quick toss. And you just wanna keep caramelizing. I'll add garlic salt and cream to this later, but I wait to add my garlic salt till the very end because seasonings can kind of burn on the bottom of your pan if you're cooking for a long time. So I don't want them to burn and add a slightly different flavor. And I really want these onions and the mushrooms to be the star of my sauce. Okay, let's whip up our mashed potatoes. Okay, I'm gonna pour in a little bit of cream. You don't actually need a lot of cream, but it helps to have just a nice thing. So I start with about probably 1/3 of a cup. Not too much. And then I'm gonna give a nice helping of salt because potatoes are like sponges and they use a lot more salt than you think, which is always why I salt them at the end and not in the boiling because you never really taste that salting. With it. And mix it around. And I really try to whip it into the sides of my pan. Don't ever do this in a Dutch oven or like a cast iron or a non-stick pan because you'll ruin it. This is all clad, so it's stainless steel, which means it can take the beating from my whisk. Let me flip these. But yes, anything that has a non-stick surface in it, your whisk will literally shred it. So don't ever do it there. There we go. I brown those off. And then I added a bit more cream to this, so let's whip it up. You can see, got a nice fluffy mashed potato. And then I'm gonna taste it, see if it needs a little bit of salt. I think a pinch more salt and a little bit more cream, and then we are good on the mashed potatoes.
Oh, and for the people who've been asking for recipe cards.
Yes, we just started putting some of our recipe cards up. I've got 2 done. It takes me a hot minute to make, but I'm getting them up, and we'll be adding them and posting them to our page and whatnot. But I'm trying to I've got my sourdough recipe up, and I just made one for my pretzels, which we made last night. And I'm working through some of the recipes that I've already done. And I hope to have them for future recipes too. Okay, so our mashed potatoes are done. And then what you should do until everything is ready, put your top bag on, and that's gonna keep them nice and warm. Okay, let's give these a quick stir. We're starting to get a nice golden brown on them. And then I'm going to take these pork chops out. Sear these guys off. And the pork chops, we'll put them in the oven, and they don't need very long to finish cooking, but it just helps them stay nice and tender because pork is notorious for going like really dry really fast. So that's why I always pan sear them and then finish them off in the oven. Okay. Our broccoli is melted nicely, and our bread is probably about done in just a second. So let me give these a nice stir. So when I'm sauteing up, this is what I consider a perfect mushroom. It has this lovely brown crust on it. Just perfect. That's how I want all of them to look. Because that's just has the most flavor in it. And then, let's see how these are cooking up. There we go.
What's the cut of pork?
These are a bone-in pork chop. So they have the pork loin and they have the rib meat, which is like the T-bone. So like it's like a T-bone steak, but of a pork chop. So the rib meat part is the really tender and great one, but it's the smaller, it's this part, the really smaller part of the pork chop. This is the loin, and this part on the side of the bone is the rib meat. But I love the rib meat. I think it's the most tender and flavorful part of a pork chop. Okay. Once these two get seared off, we're gonna pop them in our oven with our broccoli. So you guys can see that the broccoli still needs a few more minutes, which is perfect because our goal is to get everything done at the same time. Nice. So we've got a nice browning crust. I'm going to put these right here. I'm going to turn this pan off. And then we're going to put these in the oven. If you want to walk around, you guys will be able to see our broccoli in here. And I just have my oven set to 350. So anytime I'm finishing off my meat in the oven, it's at 350. I'm going to put them underneath here so it's more of a residual heat than a direct heat. And we're going to let those cook off. And
how long do you cook the pork chops in the oven for?
It's about 5 minutes or so. It's not very long. What I'll do is I'll do my finger touch and I'll see if it, like a steak, pork chops have the very similar, oh beautiful. We've got a nice beautiful coloring on our Dutch oven here. This is our sourdough. Nice, beautiful golden crust on the top. Lovely. And I'm gonna put it right here. When you do make sourdough bread, you want to wait at least 10 minutes before cutting into it, because if you cut into it too soon, you'll let out all the moisture, and then you can get more of a dry bread. Okay, now I'm going to add in just a dash of Worcestershire. This is just going to bring out some nice flavors and give my sauce a little. And then a little bit of garlic salt. Give them a good stir, and then we're gonna add just a bit of cream to make a nice, juicy, smothered mushroom kind of gravy. I'm gonna turn my heat down just a little bit. There we go. And then we're gonna saute this up. And it will thicken up as the moisture escapes. And we're going to just simply keep stirring it until most of the moisture has escaped. So it's more, it's kind of, the cream will stick to the mushrooms and onions. And you see how it's getting this just really lovely color? So these are our smothered mushrooms and onions that we'll top our pork chops with. But my husband is not a huge fan of mushrooms, but one of my sons are, my parents, we love them. So these are where they're at. Okay, let me turn this off. And I'm gonna move this out of the way, and we'll pull our sourdough loaf out and we'll put it on a breadboard so that it can rest. I always like to take my sourdough off of the Dutch oven as quickly as possible, because the Dutch oven retains its heat, so it will continue to cook it a lot more, and I don't want my bottom to get too crusty. So I'll see top, but see, I want it to be nice. This is a good bottom crust on our sourdough. If you leave it in there until it's completely cold, that will continue to cook it. So
yes, Len, I am the one recording.
So here is our beautiful sourdough loaf that we'll be having with dinner tonight. It's a super easy recipe. I think that's the recipe card we posted. You'll have to have your active starter, of course, but it's just 500 grams of unbleached bread flour, 375 grams of warm water, about 2 teaspoons of salt, and 100 grams of active starter.
And we have videos posted for the starters.
Posted and for the how to make the starter. So if you are new to sourdough bread, it will take you about a week and a half before you've got your first loaf, because it takes that long to get your starter active. So let's look at these broccoli and these pork chops. I'm going to pull them out. There we go. So here's our pork chops. And then I kind of give them the finger touch. So these are all about a medium rare, which I love. I also wait about 5 minutes before cutting into them, because you want them to seal in those juices. If you cut them while they're piping hot when you come out, they will just get really dry really fast. Okay, and let's bring our broccoli out. Got the nice gooey melted cheese around the sides of it. Okay, I am going to plate up how we are going to have dinner tonight. Except I'm not going to cut my bread yet, because it still needs to sit for a few more minutes. So let me put on the pork chop, and we will smother it with some beautiful mushrooms and onions. And I'm going to take a nice serving of this cheesy, look at that good, gooey, cheesy, garlicky broccoli, and a nice dollop of mashed potatoes. This will be our dinner tonight with our sourdough bread. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We try to do live cooking shows every single day. I'm getting some recipe cards out there for you guys, but again, thanks for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I've got the sourdough recipe card posted, and I'll be adding the pretzel ones and some new ones coming up. Thanks again.